How would you rank luxury watch brands? Is Rolex better than Omega? Is Grand Seiko better than Patek Philippe? And when we talk about Holy Trinity, is Vacheron Constantin actually better than Audemars Piguet? The truth is that most of these conversations never go anywhere because everyone seems to be using different criteria with them. Some people care about prestige, others care about finishing, and then, of course, resale value is always brought into the conversation. So today, we're ranking luxury watch brands from S tier all the way down to C tier. Now, before we get started, I want to establish a few ground rules here. First, this is not a ranking of prestige. Second, this is not a ranking of resale value. Third, this is not a ranking of waiting lists, celebrity endorsements, exclusivity, or marketing. And finally, this is not a ranking of individual watches. We are ranking brands in their entirety here. Now, throughout the video, I'm going to use one representative watch to illustrate the philosophy of each brand, but that watch is not determining the brand's actual placement. Instead, every brand will be evaluated according to 6 criteria: design language, versatility, craftsmanship, technical innovation, overall proposition, and coherence. When I say coherence, I'm talking about the degree to which all of the individual elements of a watch and within a brand feel as though they belong together. So there's things like proportions or finishing or materials, the movement, the bracelet, whatever complications might be included, and also the purpose of the watch itself. So the question when it comes to coherence is, do all of those elements work together in a harmonious way? So that's what we're going to have to find out. And one final thing that I have to say before we begin, and that is that there are great watches that exist in every one of these tiers. So with that in mind, let's get started with S tier. So first in S tier, we've got to talk about Omega. And the representative watch here is going to be the Aqua Terra. Now, if I could only own one watch brand, Omega would be extremely difficult to argue against. And the reason is simple. Almost no one combines the versatility, the engineering, the design, the durability, and the value as well as Omega does. You have icons in the catalog such as the Speedmaster and the Seamaster, but you also have the Aqua Terra, the Constellation, and the DeVille collections. So from a technical perspective, Omega has been incredibly innovative over the years. George Daniels' Co-Axial escapement changed the way that many people think about movement design, and Omega's tri-level implementation of that technology remains one of the defining achievements of modern watchmaking. Then when you add to that METAS certification, master chronometer standards, things like silicon balance springs and 15,000 Gauss magnetic resistance, you get some of the most advanced industrial watchmaking in the world. And to me, the Aqua Terra perfectly represents everything that Omega does really well. It's versatile, beautifully finished, it's comfortable, and it's capable of fitting into almost any collection. But overall, Omega is simply one of the most complete brands in the world, and the options to choose from here are endless. So to sum it up, Omega is the best all-around luxury watch brand, and that's why it's in the S tier. So moving on to our second brand, we're going to talk about Grand Seiko, also in the S tier. Now the representative watch here is going to be the SBGA 211, the Snowflake. Now Grand Seiko occupies kind of a fascinating position in the watch world because it blends traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge engineering. Its design philosophy is heavily inspired by nature, and nowhere is that more evident than on the brand's incredible dials. Then to add to that, you have spring drive technology. Now, spring drive is one of the most innovative movement technologies ever made because it really combines the best aspects of both mechanical and quartz watchmaking into one remarkable system. Now, alongside this, Grand Seiko also offers high beat movements, extraordinary case finishing through their Zaratsu polishing, and tolerances that rival watches costing far more. The Snowflake is the perfect example of this. You get everything great in one package. You have a beautifully textured dial, a lightweight titanium case, outstanding finishing, as you always find on these models, and the spring drive technology that I just talked about, all in a single watch. and all for under 5 grand. So although the catalog and references can be confusing sometimes, and the brand doesn't possess the same recognition level of, say, a Rolex, that's also part of the wonder around Grand Seiko. It's almost like an if you know kind of brand. Because from a purely objective standpoint, Grand Seiko deserves to be here. So to sum up, Grand Seiko is the king of craftsmanship and finishing in the perfect combination. Now we're going to move into the A tier brands. So our first brand in the A tier is going to be Jaeger-LeCoultre. Now the representative watch here, I'm going to use the Master Ultra Thin Moon 39mm. So Jaeger-LeCoultre has long been known as the watchmaker's watchmaker. This is a company that has spent generations solving incredibly difficult engineering problems and providing movements to some of the best known brands, including a few that are on this list. Ultra-thin movements remain one of the brand's greatest accomplishments, but the engineering expertise that they have extends far beyond that. You're also going to find remarkable hand finishing with JLC, beautiful guilloche work, exceptional enamel craftsmanship, and some of the finest complications in the industry. Now, the Master Ultra Thin Moon represents everything the brand does well. It's elegant, it's restrained, it's beautifully proportioned, and there's technical impressiveness here too. Now, the only reason that JLC doesn't move into S tier is because, one, the catalog isn't quite as broad and versatile as like an Omega, and JLC's retail pricing can be a little hard to swallow at times. But the overall proposition is still there in a very real way. So to sum up, JLC is the watchmaker's watchmaker, and they demonstrate that in what I personally believe to be some of the most beautiful ways that you can find. Now, next brand on our list in A tier, Rolex. And the representative watch we're going to use is the Air King. Now, Rolex is one of the easiest brands to recognize, and it's also one of the most difficult to criticize when you're being objective about it. Rolex rarely reinvents itself. Instead, the company just refines proven ideas and applies them in different ways. So things like the Chronergy escapement, the Parachrome hairspring, Paraflex shock absorbers, the Oyster case, which is well known, and the superlative chronometer certification all demonstrate that philosophy within the brand. Now, the modern Air King represents that approach perfectly. It's durable, it's reliable, extremely well built, and unmistakably Rolex design. Yet it's Rolex at its best because there's a little bit of quirkiness that adds fun and intrigue to the watch. Now, the reason that Rolex falls into A tier rather than S tier here is that the overall proposition becomes much more complicated when you start to talk about availability and secondary market pricing. So in sum, Rolex is the benchmark for everyday luxury watches. Now, continuing with our A tier brands, let's talk about Vacheron Constantin. Now, the representative watch I'm going to use here is the Quai de Lille, which was a lesser known model from Vacheron. But Vacheron may be the most understated and underrated member of the Holy Trinity. The brand has always emphasized refinement, quality that isn't loud, and elegant design. You're talking about Geneva seal movements, exceptional hand finishing, and remarkable complications have become the defining characteristics of the company. Now, the Quai de Lille demonstrates that Vacheron is capable of blending traditional watchmaking with more modern ideas. Yes, the Overseas has become the strongest model line from the brand, and it's earned that spot, there's no doubt. But I appreciate the Quai de Lille kind of offered a different style that still delivered on the quality that you'd expect from Vacheron at a much more affordable price point. Now, on that note, Vacheron's primary weakness is accessibility. For the most part, we're talking about a much smaller catalog at a significantly higher price point. So in sum, Vacheron Constantin represents traditional watchmaking at its finest. Now we're going to move on to our B tier brands. And the first brand on this list will probably be a little controversial, and that is Patek Philippe. The representative watch we're going to use is the Calatrava. Now, few brands command more respect than Patek Philippe. If JLC is the watchmaker's watchmaker, Patek would probably be the grandfather of watchmaking. And they do live up to that in every way. The movement finishing is extraordinary, and the company's grand complications remain among the finest ever created. You're talking about things like minute repeaters, perpetual calendars, split-second chronographs, and highly sophisticated movement architecture that have become hallmarks of the brand. Now, the Calatrava demonstrates that simplicity can be extraordinarily difficult to execute well, but Patek still does it. There's no question. Now, the challenge with this is that the overall proposition of Patek becomes increasingly difficult to justify at modern prices. You own a Patek in a very real way because it's a Patek. And while that's something to aspire to, it's also a challenge that the brand has to acknowledge, facing steep competition from the other watchmakers, many of which are on this list. So to sum up, Patek Philippe remains the standard for incredible traditional Swiss watchmaking. Now, next up in our B tier, we have A Lange und Sohne. Now, the representative watch I'm going to use here is the Lange 1. Lange might be the greatest example of German watchmaking excellence. The brand is an insane fan club of its own. German silver plates, hand-engraved balance bridges, blued screws, golden chatons, and the famous double assembly process all contribute to some of the most beautiful movements ever created in watchmaking. Now, with Lange, you also have watches such as the Zeitwerk, which display the time digitally while incorporating a wonderfully decorated remontoire system and constant force mechanism. Those are extraordinary accomplishments in and of themselves. So there's no doubt that Lange excels at both artistry and engineering. And the challenge with that is that the brand appeals to a much narrower audience, not only due to the price point here, but because of the intellectual ability it takes to appreciate that kind of watch. So to sum up, A Lange und Sohne is the pinnacle of German watchmaking. Now, next up in our B tier, Audemars Piguet. The representative watch we're going to talk about is, of course, the Royal Oak, because it's one of the most influential watches ever produced. There's no question about it. Its finishing alone is remarkable. Dozens of hours can be devoted to finishing a single bracelet, with brushed and polished surfaces flowing seamlessly from one component to the next. Every angle, every facet, and every transition really matters for them. Now, AP's movement expertise is also extremely impressive, particularly when it comes to ultra-thin watches and their perpetual calendars. I would also say they have some of the most impressive looking flying tourbillons in the entire industry, and that is saying a lot. Now, the challenge with AP is one thing, and that is that so much of the brand's identity revolves around a single collection, the Royal Oak. It is an icon, and it's an icon that has also become kind of a kickstand that AP relies on a little too much. So to sum up, the Royal Oak might be the most beautifully finished sports watch ever made. Now, next up in the B tier, we are talking about Blancpain. And the representative watch here is going to be the 50 Fathoms, because it is one of the most historically important dive watches ever produced. Unlike many luxury dive watches that followed it, the 50 Fathoms was designed from the beginning as a serious professional instrument. And Blancpain also offers excellent movements, they offer silicone technology, and extremely good finishing compared to what you'd get at a similar price point. Now, the difficulty here is that the catalog lacks the breadth of some of the competing brands and the design elements of some models. Though they've become well-known and iconic, they don't have the same modern look and feel as what you would find in other watchmaking houses. And I do think that that's lessened the appeal and kept Blancpain as more of a real luxury diver's brand. So to sum up, Blancpain created one of the greatest icons of modern watchmaking. Now, next up, we have Glashutte Original, and the representative watch here is going to be the PanoMatic Lunar. So GO is one of the best values in luxury watchmaking. Distinctive asymmetrical designs, beautiful movement architecture, duplex swan neck regulation, and exceptional finishing give the brand a unique identity that really no other brand can have. The PanoMatic Lunar demonstrates that asymmetry can be beautiful when it's executed properly, and everything feels deliberate and coherent with GO. But they are still working to create that one standout piece that some of these other brands do have. So to sum up, Glashutte Original is one of watchmaking's hidden gems, no doubt. Now we're going to move on to the C tier, and keep in mind what I started with. There are great watches to be had at every tier. So this one, we're going to kick off with Girard-Perregaux. And the representative watch is going to be the Laureato. Now, Girard-Perregaux possesses one of the richest histories in all of watchmaking. The company achieved remarkable success in many of the observatory chronometer competitions, while the Three Bridges architecture became one of the most recognizable movement designs in the world of watchmaking. Now, many Laureato models also feature beautiful enameling and impressive finishing. The challenge for GP is that they've struggled to establish a unified identity in the minds of many collectors. They tend to live in the highs and lows, with amazing three gold bridge architectures alongside what remains a fairly simple integrated watch. But I do believe that as of late, they've really been evolving with some of their new Laureato releases and their newly offered movements as well. So to sum up, Girard-Perregaux deserves far more recognition than it receives as a watchmaker. Now, next up, Breguet. And the representative watch here is going to be the Classique. So if there were a separate ranking on this list based solely on historical importance, Breguet would undoubtedly rank near the top. Because you can't discount the contributions to watchmaking that were made by Abraham Louis Breguet, such as the original tourbillon. The brand offers things like engine-turned guilloche dials, coin edge cases, Breguet hands, classical movement architecture, and hand finishing, which are all defining characteristics for the brand. Breguet remains one of the great guardians of traditional watchmaking. But the difficulty is that by staying true to a more classical design, collectors may intellectually appreciate what the brand has to offer, but the designs appeal to a relatively narrower audience today. So to sum up, Breguet preserves the traditions that built modern watchmaking. Now, our next brand on the list is Cartier, and the representative watch here is going to be the Santos. Now, I know that this may be the most controversial placement in the entire video, because there's no question that Cartier is one of the most successful and influential companies in the world, second only to Rolex in many estimates of sales volume. They have the Santos, the Tank, the Privé, all of them are tremendously important. And my hesitation with Cartier really comes down to the last criteria that I talked about, which is coherence. For me, the combination of Roman numerals, modern materials, exposed screws, and sporty bracelets, along with those other design elements, create an experience to me that feels less unified than some of the brands above it. Now, that doesn't make Cartier bad. It simply means that according to this framework, it's going to score lower. And that's why it's my framework. And you, of course, should have your own, like I discussed in my last video about discovering your core preferences. So to sum up, Cartier is one of the masters of watch design. Now, the last brand we're going to talk about is IWC. And the representative watch here is going to be the Mark 20. So IWC has always approached watchmaking from an engineering perspective. The Peloton winding system, anti-magnetic construction, and the Kurt Klaus perpetual calendar are all examples of extraordinary achievements from IWC. The fact that a perpetual calendar can now be adjusted directly from the crown remains incredibly impressive. Now, the main challenge is the size, particularly as someone with pretty small wrists, under 15 centimeters, who also doesn't mind big watches. I often feel that most of IWC's catalog would wear massively. And not just on me. I know I'm not alone in this. The majority of IWC watches simply wear larger than many collectors would prefer. So to sum up, IWC represents engineering in its purest form on the wrist. So there you have it. That is my luxury watch tier list. Now, you may agree with some of these rankings and you may completely disagree with others, but that is perfectly fine because, as usual, the purpose of this exercise is not to tell you what you should like. It was to establish a framework and apply it consistently across the brands listed, and there were plenty more that I could have covered. And ultimately, that is what collecting is all about. The best watch brand isn't necessarily the one at the top of the list. It's the one that aligns the best with what you value. So let me know what your rankings would look like. I'd be curious to know whether you agree or disagree with how I've presented and rated the brands here. Thank you so much for stopping by. If you enjoyed this one, please like the video and subscribe to my channel, and I will see you all next time. Bye-bye.